Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the flexibility. As you know, I'm simultaneously in Judiciary Committee, so I appreciate the opportunity to join virtually. And I'll just jump right into it. Strengthening our electrical grid is an ongoing effort, particularly in my home state of California. Now, 2 years ago, you may recall an extreme summer heat wave placed so much stress on the grid that rolling blackouts were imposed on many customers across the state. Now, this September, triple-digit temperatures during an extreme heat dome event presented a similar challenge to the grid, with peak electricity demands reaching a new all-time high. This time, however, there were no rolling blackouts, and we have the hundreds of thousands of Californians who took voluntary steps to reduce their energy consumption to thank for that. We also have improved an energy storage system to thank. Between 2020 and this year's heat wave, California installed over 3,000 megawatts of new battery storage. And I'm proud to have led the effort to include $5 billion in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to enhance the physical resilience of the electrical grid in response to extreme weather events and natural disasters. Electric vehicles draw power from the grid, but some models coming to the market soon will have the capacity to return power to the intense demand or serve as their own residential or community power generators, a system of bidirectional charging. Question is for Mr. Stanberry. How does school bus fleet electrification, along with the rollout of vehicle-to-grid technology, present opportunities to support improved grid resiliency, especially during emergency situations?
Senator Padilla, thank you very much for the question. We're proud to be doing work with school districts in California. Electric school buses, as folks may guess, have very large battery packs that can serve multiple purposes. And since these buses have duty cycles or use patterns that leave them unused for much of the time, the batteries can be used to serve critical functions. In particular, they can provide power back to the grid and buildings and other devices when needed. And I would say that the electric school buses are designed in part due to some of the work in California to provide that bidirectional flow. Most of them today can do this. And that means that we can provide vehicle-to-grid services where the buses can provide power back to the grid in times of need. We have a couple of operating vehicle-to-grid projects up in South Burlington, Vermont, behind Green Mountain Power, out in Beverly Public Schools in Massachusetts with National Grid. And these, in fact, these very vehicles are being used to provide power during peak demand events. The other thing I would note, given the senator's outline of extreme events and community response to extreme events, we are seeing an increased interest because the batteries of these buses can be used not only to flow power back to the grid, but also to buildings, in using these batteries in tandem with on-site solar generation in places like California to form a local microgrid that can use the schools, which of course are public buildings, as community resilience centers during times of natural disaster. So really, these bus batteries end up serving the purpose of a community resource.
And Senator, if I may, I think that there's an additional benefit beyond the V2G side of beneficial use. And what we see is that EVs, whether it's the bus side or the light-duty vehicle side, have the ability to help flatten the belly of the duck curve as we see daytime utilization coinciding with peak solar generation in California and elsewhere. So there's a symbiosis there that can happen even just on the usage side of the equation.
So thank you for that addition, Mr. Chair. I know my time is short, but I'd like to ask just one more question.
Go right ahead. Make it fairly brief.
And it is related here. So I think I speak for all of us when I say we applaud President Biden's critically important goal of deploying 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations by the year 2030.
Would you
to
say
achieve
that
this
again?
ambitious
You
feat,
cut out.
we clearly
How many? You cut out when you said
500,000.
That's what I thought. You said. Go ahead.
So to achieve this, it's clear we're going to need strong public-private partnerships and maximize incentives for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It's notable that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will make generational investments in electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And I want to make sure that no one is left behind from these investments. It's critical to focus on building out charging infrastructure within communities and not just along highway corridors. A 2021 UCLA study on electric vehicle charging found that residents of multifamily housing units largely rely on public charging infrastructure. And it's especially the case in my home state of California, where apartment buildings comprise almost 1/3 of all housing units. And in addition to that, residents of multi-unit dwellings tend to be more low and moderate income individuals and live in areas more heavily impacted by the air pollution we're trying to counter. So, Mr. Levy, how can we work together toward a more equitable deployment of charging stations, and what can the federal government do to ensure that we're meeting the needs of families in the communities where they live, work, and go to school?
And I'm going to ask you to be very brief in your response.
Yes, sir. I'll be very quick. Essentially, there's a couple of different ways. One, we vehemently agree with you that FHWA should encourage states to move quickly from corridor to also supporting community charging projects, and can do that by setting the date that which the corridors are built out as the date of obligation of funds. Second of all, we would note that the work that Senator Carper, Senator Cardin, you, and others all did on IRA included the geo-targeting of 30C to look at lower percentage of income census tracts. And third, private companies like EVgo have a role to play here. And what we have done is incorporated the EPA's environmental justice screen tool into our proprietary siting analysis tool so that we can say, let's make sure that we are going to those disproportionately impacted communities, whether those chargers are going to be used by those very same residents that you mentioned may not have access to parking, or the rideshare drivers that start and end those trips in low to moderate income communities that are disproportionately burdened by PM 2.5 and other pollutants.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.